Hi there. You're listening to Franchising Uncovered, and today I'm here with the founder of Mini First Aid and Dragon's Den winner. Yeah, I've got to say that, Kate Ball. Great to have you on, Kate.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. I love having a good chat about our business. It's been quite a journey, so I'm looking forward to sharing it with you.
Good, excellent. Yeah, well, I've done a bit of I knew about you anyway, just because franchising's quite a small world, really, as you know. And I've been around in franchising for 22 years. Um, and yeah, I also know about you because of Dragon's Den, because I've always been quite a big fan of Dragon's Den. So
Yeah.
I remember seeing you on there, and the reason I remember you and other businesses is as soon as the word franchise pops up when we're on a pitch, I'm all ears. I'm like, oh, franchise, brilliant. Someone's there now, pitching as a franchise, and you don't see that often. And,
No.
and and obviously in franchising, we're always trying to get franchising out there, into government at lots and lots of levels. So it just was great to see. Anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll probably touch on that a little bit, in the next, 20-25 minutes, if that's all right, Kate. Um,
Great.
but first of all, I want you to just tell me really, anything and everything you would like to about Mini First Aid.
Okay. So I'll tell you back from the beginning, really. So where we started and I guess the story that the driver, the founder's story as such. My background is in learning and development. I worked for a big confectionery brand, headed up learning and development in the UK. And I loved my job. It was great. And one of the things that fell into my remit was actually booking the first aid training. And it was always like a bit of a hot potato because it was always that thing that nobody really wanted to do. It was booking an external provider that would come in and lead first aid training. It was a tick box exercise because it was just something that we had to have. We were a manufacturer as well as having a call center, sales division, etc. And I used to book the first aid with just a local supplier to the business and always used to look through the window and see our delegates who were training to be first aiders. And they always looked like they were going to fall asleep, like as if, oh, eye roll, I've got to do my first aid. So that had happened. Um, I had also experienced a family tragedy where my brother had a condition called cardiomyopathy. It's sort of known most or reported most in the world of sport. You may remember or be familiar with the story of the Swedish football player last year who went into cardiac arrest, had to be resuscitated on the pitch during a live international football match. And that's effectively what happened to my brother. Only unfortunately for my brother, we weren't aware that he had cardiomyopathy. And the outcome for him wasn't positive because the young people that were on the scene with him initially weren't able to deliver comprehensive CPR. And in fact, one of them in his memorial book wrote, "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," and which is just absolute tragedy. And these young people, they were 22 at the time, hadn't done anything wrong. They just didn't know first aid. And it always bothered me that from a learning and development perspective, something that effectively is the most important life skill you ever learn. And I think I would challenge anyone to say any other life skill is more important than being able to keep someone alive. And to deliver CPR, is that why these young people hadn't done this training was that it wasn't readily available, it wasn't informal, it wasn't memorable, and it wasn't something that people thought of as anything more than a tick box exercise. So that was sort of a collision of my learning and development background, and then obviously this absolute tragedy that had hit my family. And I also became a mum, and I had a young baby, and I had already got this real thing about wanted everybody to learn to save a life. And when I had my baby, I knew that I needed to know what to do for him. And I went to try and attend a first aid course, arrived with him for a course that was going to be 6 hours in duration, which I felt was quite a long time. But I signed up for this course, turned up with my baby in a car seat, and got turned away at the door because the insurance of the business didn't cover me to have my baby with me. So it was sort of like this collision of life events meant that there had to be a better way. And so my background in learning development meant that I knew I could write a really good training course that was memorable using different learning styles. I'm an NLP practitioner, so I knew how we could anchor things, get people using muscle memory. So what I then did is went and qualified as a first aid instructor and wrote a mini first aid class. and invited parents to come and learn with me at home in my local community. Parents used to turn up of an evening, bringing their babies in tow if they needed to, so that they could merrily breastfeed, feed their babies, cuddle their babies throughout. And that's how I started 10 years ago. And I guess then roll on to where we are now. We have franchised the business. We have 72 franchises across the UK. We train over 1,000 families every week. And not only do we train people who've just had a baby, but we train children in primary schools. We trained 80,000 school children just last year alone. We train young people preparing to leave home. And we're doing what I felt really passionately about was the workplace piece, which is actually those people that do have to do first aid as a tick box exercise for work, get on a course that they feel is really memorable. And it's been quite a journey to get to that point. And I hope that wherever my brother is, up on a cloud somewhere, is my vision, is that he's looking down and going that in tragedy has come some sort of real hope in what we're now offering as mini first aid.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he is, Kate. And that's an amazing story, and it definitely helps me understand how the business started, and also I think I think the most successful businesses come out of a need, but
Yeah.
also are driven by a passion, and obviously you've got both for various reasons, but yeah, it all makes sense then. One thing I wanted to ask you about in that journey was franchising. When did you decide? Obviously, you built the business up yourself independently. When did you decide, and how did you come to the conclusion that franchising the business was the right thing to do?
So I had a very good friend of mine who lived in another city to us. So we're Leeds in Yorkshire. A friend of mine was based in Bristol. And she'd obviously been following along with my journey and said to me, I think there's a real need for this in Bristol as well. I can't see any offering similar to what you're offering for parents and carers. My parents are from Bristol, so we agreed that I would go and stay with my parents for a weekend and we'd run some events. So we'd set them up and we would see if people would come and train with us in Bristol. And on this particular Saturday, which was 9 years ago, on this particular Saturday, we invited via Facebook advertising people to come and attend this class, and we sold out, and we trained over 50 couples during the day on our mini first aid classes. So we ran back-to-back classes, and my friend, who was at the time working as cabin crew, thought this is ace and saw this as an opportunity for her to have a change, perhaps from doing her cabin crew role. And so she said, look, I'd really like to get on board and I'd like to work for you. And I'm already a trained first aider, but I'll run mini first aid in Bristol. And we had an option then, which was either that she became my employee, or we did something around licensing, or we franchised. And I say we because my husband Matt, whilst he was working in another his own organisation, an events company business, was always behind me, sort of supporting me in the setup of what I was doing for Mini First Aid. And so I went and took some local advice, and I was introduced to somebody by, how these things happen in business, in networks. And I was at a networking event and somebody said to me, oh, you ought to chat to so-and-so. They franchise their coffee business. You really ought to chat to them. And I went and met this guy. And he talked me through why franchising was so important. And I, before that, had probably had a little bit of a skeptical view of franchising. I thought it was just for the big takeaway outlets, perhaps for the coffee houses. Was it really for a first aid business where our aim was to do good? Did we want to have that sort of, I almost saw it as being, we didn't want to sort of, it's the dirty word of franchising. But actually, in that initial meeting, I got really on board with what it would give me in the way of brand control, because effectively what I wanted was everything that I'd created, my brand, my logo, and obviously having come from an organization like Mars, where logo and brand is everything, I knew that that was really important. And if I had created this and I got this class, I needed to make sure that Zoe, who was then going to go on and be my first franchise, ran it in exactly the same way as I was running it in Leeds. So that experience was the same. And franchising was the way to do that. It was the way to do it. It was all controlled. And so I was bought in to the extent where I said, I'm going to try it. And I agreed with Zoe that she would trial it for me for a period of 12 months and see. And we did sort of borderline fees versus mates rates versus let's just see if this works. And she was an absolute roaring success. And then we rolled on to include and advertise more franchises. We initially had a refer a friend scheme for people who were working in franchising with us to then refer new franchisees. And so we had quite a haul of cabin crew personnel that joined us in the early days, because Zoe was very well networked in one of the major airlines. And it was a perfect job for somebody working in cabin crew. They were already extensively trained in first aid. They also had that brilliant customer service, customer focus, great presenters, all those sorts of things. And then we could teach them the mini first aid way and they could go teach. So yeah, so that's how it came about. But sometimes people will say to me, well, did you always intend to run a franchise organization? Absolutely not. I was working in learning development. I'm very happy. Obviously, the tragedy with my brother and life's events sort of led me to working in first aid. But if someone had asked me, even in that very first few classes that I ran for mini first aid in Leeds, did I ever envisage it being what it is now? No, absolutely not. This was a personal journey that I was on, making a difference locally in my community in sort of my brother's memory. So the franchising has also been sort of incidental. So consequently, has been a massive, massive learning curve for us. Massive.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no, that it's really interesting that what you say, because I think that's the thing. Lots of small businesses, when they first hear about franchising, they do think, oh, it's for the McDonald's. It's almost for the big corporates, I think,
Sure.
which is
Yeah.
weird because it's ironic, really, that because it's the actual total opposite of that. If you
Mm.
set up in the right way, it's a local business owner offering local services to a local community. That's really what franchising is, and done in the best kind of possible way. So that's how I look at franchising. But I think most people that don't understand that, yeah, do look at it the way you probably felt about
And I
it.
and I
And
think, the franchisees that have gone on to join us have huge entrepreneurial flair, but actually what they've been able to do is have a business in a box effectively. So everything is ready for them. We've put the processes in place, we've put the brand in place, we've put the controls and everything and the lesson plan. And now, I want to go as far as to say, if you go onto one of our classes in Aberdeen versus if you go on one of our classes in Bournemouth, you will get the same experience. And that is like McDonald's. You buy a cheeseburger and it tastes the same wherever you buy it from. And you also get the same feeling when you go into their restaurant. And that's what I wanted to have as my model for mini first aid. And it's worked. And it's worked really, really well for us. And I'm now a big advocate for franchising. And if people are talking to me as a local business, perhaps particularly in our early initial sector, which is parent and carer, is that if people have got a great class that they run and they're saying, well, I'm thinking of employing people to or getting people to run it in the next town or what have you, then I'm the one banging the drum saying, well, you need to franchise, because then you keep that brand control.
absolutely, yeah. Now, so you were a franchise already when you got the call from Dragon's Den, right? So
We were.
and so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I always, I watch a lot of Dragon's Den, and just, yes, franchising really interesting. But I always feel that the Dragon's Den folk don't always see franchising as a positive thing. And I've just heard lots about it, and lots of people in the franchising community get all het up over it sometimes when Peter Jones says something or when someone else says something about franchising, which is kind of a bit negative. You went in there as a franchise, and how much do you remember? And maybe it wasn't all on camera because obviously they edited a lot, but
Mm.
how much did they dig into the franchise side of the business? And
Massive. Mm.
and how do you feel they all felt about franchising? And because I'm really interested in that, because it doesn't always come across that much
No.
on
So
TV.
so if you watch the edit back of our clip, so we were 14 minutes of TV. That's what was shown in the show. So that's what, but we were actually in the den for nearly we were an hour and 46 minutes, I think. Actually in recording, and we started obviously by demonstrating children's first aid. Dragon's Den were very keen that we had that angle. So we took our children in with us, which was another thing that we had to contend with, was working with our own children. But we took our kids in to do the demonstration, which was brilliant. And we talked about our personal story, and I talked about my brother. And actually, I got quite emotional talking about my brother. Some of that's in the edit, some of it isn't. And what we got back in feedback from the Dragons around what we were doing was positive feedback from all 5 dragons. So all 5 dragons said, what you are doing is amazing, you're saving lives. And we gave some examples of where people, and it happens all the time for us, is that people will message us and say, I went to your class, this happened with my baby, my child, my work colleague, whoever it is, and because of your teaching I knew what to do. So we were able to talk very passionately about our core purpose and what we were doing. When it then came to franchising, we were talking about the fact that we had a franchise network of approximately 50 franchises we were at the time. So we were, we were a good chunky size. I would say we were, our franchisees at the time were majority sort of lifestyle franchisees. So they were doing it as a top-up earning, or perhaps doing it on a lower scale. Not all. That's changed quite a lot in subsequent years. Some of them have built really quite hefty organizations, and that's very much where the business is going in its direction. But at the time, what the dragons did was that they were looking at, how the franchising would work with their investment, because whilst they're investing in our business, effectively we had at the time 50 stakeholders that have all got input into the organization. That's a lot of people if there is change, etc. And they couldn't necessarily see from us at the time on the numbers that we were delivering whether there was space for dragons investment. And one of the dragons, Tej Lavani, CEO of Vitabiotics, said, I love it, but I don't love it because it's franchised. So that was his actual reason for being out. The other dragons that didn't opt to invest all opted out because they didn't feel that there was enough money in the business. And we were turning over, it was great, we were doing well, we were performing well, but we weren't a hugely profitable organization because we were still in the early stages of our business. Everything that was being generated was going back in, etc. So they didn't see where there would be this pocket for them, with the exception of Sara Davies, who just went, I love it. And I love that you've got this massive team and you've got all these business owners that are all entrepreneurial and are all taking your brand and expanding it into the communities across the UK. And I want in. And she never challenged the fact that we were a franchise business. She didn't challenge it in the filming. She hasn't challenged it since. And actually, she's been, since her investment in Mini First Aid, she's been really involved with the franchisees. So she speaks at our conference every year. We have these informal Zooms where we have a coffee with Sara and the franchisees can talk to her, because she's actually been a real role model for the organization, because she's an entrepreneur. She started a small business and created it and scaled it. And whilst they have a franchise, effectively they are a small business that they want to scale. So they learned so much from working with Sara. So we were quite surprised afterwards by how much attention we got from the franchise community, because people were so pleased that at last another franchise business had made it through the Dragons process, because there's a couple of us and that's it. In all the years of Dragon's Den, there's literally a handful.
Stagecoach is another one, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was years before us. So
Yeah.
we were really pleased that we were flying that flag for franchising.
No, and that's why I remember it, because there are so few, it's so few and far between, really, and it's a real
Yeah.
shame on one hand.
And one of the things that we did is, because you never know how the edit's going to go, and we have product that we sell at our classes, and we also have first aid products that we sell through retail, and we had literally stacked our warehouse floor to ceiling with our first aid kits ready for the orders to come flying in, thinking that perhaps Dragon's Den would edit us to be about the product. And actually the edit ended up being a lot more about the business. So what we saw within the first few days after the airing of the show is we saw a year's worth of franchise inquiries come through in 2 days, which said to us, people want to work for us. People want to be part of this business. And now a huge number of our franchisees that are currently working within our community were as a result of Dragon's Den, because they watched us and went, we'd quite like to be part of this. We want to work for Kate and Matt. So, it's great. So our franchise sales were huge afterwards.
Brilliant. So, for franchise recruitment, your tip is get on Dragon's Den and get some good
Absolutely.
feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, but it didn't come without worry, because one of the
Yeah.
concerns that I had is that if we went into the den and we got beaten up, so to speak, so we got negative feedback or criticism, there was a risk not only to Matt and I for our business, our beloved business, but also all of our franchisees. Because imagine that, someone had said, and we've all watched episodes of The Den, not so much latterly, they're it's not so cool to unpick people in a, you know, derogatory way anymore. That's not, it's not good, it's not thought of as good TV any longer. And but you know, we've all remember Dragon's Den episodes where dragons have been really unkind, mocked, you know, that sort of thing. And I remember saying to Matt the night before in the hotel, what if they do that to us? What if they say, you know, that we're an you know, you uninvestable business, etc., etc. And Matt, who is far more grounded and less emotional about his reactions to stuff, said to me, look, Kate, they cannot beat us up for teaching life saving. So the worst thing that's going to happen to us is that we're not going to get investment, but they cannot tell us that what we do is wrong. And he was absolutely right, because even the other dragons that chose not to invest all gave us hugely positive feedback. So we lucked out, really. You know, we got an investor, we got Sara, but we also got really strong feedback, which we still use in all our advertising, from the 4 other dragons that were in the room that day.
And Kate, beyond, so after Dragon's Den, where has Sara? She's obviously still in, you know, very much involved, as you've said. But where did she help the most? Either as a business or as a franchise business or both. What did she bring the most to help you kind of just take that next step or develop?
So there was twofold, really. One is that her team, being her business being a product related business, her team were able to support us with the development of some of our first aid products. So some of the branded products that we sell at our classes, in design, development, etc. So she was able to lend their support. It's actually threefold, actually, not two, because of that. The other piece was in media. So she's given me a huge amount of media training. We've had media coverage. She's got us on the TV. She's opened doors to us in that sense. She also has TV studios that we use for the filming of our classes and guides and all sorts of stuff, which has saved us quite significant investment had we had to do that privately. And then the final piece is that because the business has evolved and has changed, there's been a lot of change, is that she's been really, really helpful in supporting the franchisees through that change process. So a franchisee that perhaps joined us 6-7 years ago, who came in as a lifestyler, perhaps wanting to run 1 class a week, and now we've shown them what opportunity they have to run lots of classes, perhaps have a team, have office premises, have branded vehicles, all that sort of stuff. Sara has helped to support with that vision and help franchisees really see where they sit in the organization and how they can grow and perhaps leave their other career to take on mini first aid and she's been really instrumental in supporting us with that change management process, which has meant that our churn rate has stayed really low, and she's been right in there with that, really supporting the franchisees and allowing the franchisees to see change and development as a good thing rather than a threat to them.
And I guess, Kate, she's also become somewhat of a brand ambassador throughout, right?
She's amazing. Everywhere she goes. Everywhere she goes.
Yeah.
She'll say to people, you know, have you done a mini first aid class? And yeah, and she's great. And yeah, so when she's talking, we know that she's got us front of mind. Now she's got other investments, so she's got other, you know, she's got a whole portfolio now from the, I think she's 3 or 4 series in to Dragon's Den, so she's got quite a, you know, considerable portfolio. We were in the early days, and so she has to give us all equal levels of support. But we feel that what we get from Sara is certainly worth the share of our business that Sara currently has. So yeah, it's great.
And Kate, do you feel that not that Sara was never not an advocate of franchising or anything, but do you think she appreciates franchising more, having spent the time with you, your network, and helping to build that? Has she learned, do you think, about more about franchising as a business
Sure.
model?
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, I wouldn't be able to speak for her in, you know, in sense that you know, I wouldn't be able to that would need to come from her in her words. But what I do know is that we've exposed her to you know, our business warts and all effectively. So she's seen the very positive side of franchising, but also seen some of the challenges that we have in franchising. But also has not seen it, you know, I would like to think now that we're presenting as something that is just a different type of business model, but it's not so far away from running a business where you have a team of employees. So so yeah, I would hope that she sees it and views it as very positively. Whether that means that she's going to go on and invest in other franchise businesses, I don't know, because I don't know who's going to walk through the door of the den next. But you know, she's got to see an opportunity for her. She's a businesswoman. She's got to see that she's going to get, you know, payback from her investment, and that it's got to be the right fit for her portfolio.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And last question, really, Kate, and then I'll let you go. What's what do you see in your time as a franchisor as what's been the biggest kind of challenge in building the brand and building the franchise part of the business? And how have you kind of overcome that?
So the biggest challenge for us has been the fact that we are constantly evolving. So it's not just been hit one challenge, oh, we've overcome that, it's great. Actually, it's the fact that we've constantly evolved, and actually we've moved from being this lifestyle business where people come and join us and run a class a week or a class a month just for some sort of extra spends and they're doing their good thing, to actually going, the market opportunity is so big. It's so big. And we're only on the tip of the iceberg. And there are so many more people we can train. So therefore, what we need is, now that our UK franchisees is nearly full, we've got, you know, a handful left to fill in the UK. Is that because we're doing that, now we're looking at how we can develop the franchisees to become really competent business owners, to enable them to reach more people and save more lives, do more training. So the challenge has been taking these people and bringing them on the journey with us. And that's no mean feat, because this is people that perhaps initially joined us to do a good thing and have a bit of spare cash. And now we're, you know, we're helping people as they reach the VAT threshold, and start to, and their financial acumen. And we've had to get really stuck in the franchisee development. And that's been our big challenge, but a challenge that we've relished and a challenge that we've enjoyed. It's not been something that we've said, oh, this is so awful, because if it had been awful, we'd have stopped. But what's kept us going and kept us rallied is, as the business has grown and the number of people has grown that we've trained, is that the number of lives we've saved has also increased. So we've always got that. So even when we're having our 20 billionth redevelopment of the website, or how it feels, and our latest piece of thing that's going to cost us a fortune because we've got to have something sorted in the back end of our business systems that nobody sees but we have to do to be a more effective business, the next email we get will be somebody who saved their baby's life, and you go, that's why we do it. That's why we do what we do.
Brilliant. All right, Kate. Well, on that note, I'd like to just say thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll bump into each other at a franchise event here or
I'm
there.
sure we will. I'm sure we will.
All
Thank you
right,
so much for
Kate.
inviting me on.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye.